Recently, I had an interview with an Orthodox priest, and we were talking about the importance of deep friendships in your life. I'll show you a clip of that interview in a moment, but I really wanted to point out an interview that I did with Dr. Holly Ordway, talking about the deep friendship of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien.
You know, they're both Christians, they're both at Oxford, they both write fantasy, they're best friends, and then they're becoming this sort of composite figure. But personality-wise, they were very different. And one of the ways, for instance, is just the way that they socialized. Tolkien was always quieter in public, whereas Lewis was very, loud and boisterous. If Tolkien hadn't been present in Lewis's life, quite possibly Lewis wouldn't have become a Christian. Or if he did, and it's quite probably that it would have, but it would have been later. Would a Lewis who had converted later after that productive sort of sweet spot in his career, would he have written the Screwtape Letters or Mere Christianity? We might not have those books if it weren't for the fact that Tolkien helps him make the step at a pivotal point in his career. And then if we look at Lord of the Rings, Tolkien is very forthright. He says he would never have finished it if it hadn't been for Lewis's constant encouragement. So if it weren't for Lewis, we would not have the Lord of the Rings. It's such an amazing friendship. Well, the interesting thing is that their faith was not what brought them together, because when they met, Tolkien was a Catholic, but Lewis was an atheist. He was still in his atheist phase. Lewis had sort of grown up nominally Christian, but had abandoned his faith entirely by his teens. And by the time that he was at Oxford and was lecturing, and Tolkien and met him, he was not a believer. So they bonded over literature, over the Norse sagas. They had a shared love of the Norse sagas. And Lewis joined this club that called the Coalbiters, a Coalbitar, that Tolkien had founded to read Norse sagas in the original, as one does. And they discovered that they shared so many literary interests. And Tolkien very sort of tentatively and fearfully and trustingly showed Lewis a copy of a poem that he had written that came out of the Legendarium, the Lay of Leithian, which was part of this developing material that we will eventually see in the Silmarillion. It's very dear to his heart. He shares it with Lewis, and Lewis loves it and gives a really fruitful commentary on it, but not just to, oh, I loved it, but pushing back on parts of it, saying, well, no, this isn't quite good enough. But that invigorates Tolkien, and they become friends. And it's through Tolkien's influence, along with some other folks, but very strongly Tolkien's influence, that Lewis becomes a Christian. And so we have an instance there of Tolkien's influence on Lewis. And I think that iron sharpening iron was already happening there, because Lewis's questions and challenges would have, sharpened Tolkien's own faith. And then they're both Christians. And then there's this great friendship where they're able to have that in common. Are there still points of conflict? Of course there are. But it's such a fruitful friendship throughout Tolkien's whole life.
I love the friendship of Tolkien and Lewis. And again, it made me think of their friendship when I had an interview with Father Gregory Jensen, who talked about spiritual friendship in our interview here. You could potentially have a therapist in your life, but maybe not. But you do have a spiritual father. What's the role of friends, godly friends, when it comes to even revealing who we are within the boundaries of friendship? Because I think that's oftentimes missed for people. People are very lonely. They don't have deep friendships. And I think a lot of the poverty that we see spiritually in people is because they lack deep friends.
People who are raised in the church or who become Orthodox, they leave because they're not getting the healing they were hoping for. And the reason they're not getting the healing is because somewhere along the way, they don't make friends. We cannot ask our spiritual father to be the whole of our spiritual life. I have to have spiritual friends in my life. And these spiritual friends, by the way, they need to be of the same rank, the same order. I am not spiritual friends with lay people. My spiritual friends are other priests. Lay people need to be friends with other lay people, and men need to be friends with men, and women need to be friends with other women, because friendship is, and it's sort of the classical formulation, true friends love the same things in the same way. You and I both love the church, but we have different roles in the life of the church. So we are not going to love the church the same way. And there are things that I do as a priest which do not share with the laity because I just have different responsibilities. There are things between life that you don't share with your children, and rightly so. But you want your children to be friends with each other. You don't want them to be friends with you, though. So we have to cultivate those friendships. And I think this is what really does us in our parishes, is that we do not talk about our spiritual lives except in confession with the priest, which means that it's just really, really lonely. Men need to talk to other men, husbands need to talk to other husbands, and we have to have these friendships. This is what I work with the college students. One of the things that I run into on a regular basis is that kids who are raised in good Orthodox Christian homes don't come to liturgy, not out of a lack of piety, but because the university is the first time in their life where they go to church and they're alone. They've never been at liturgy without mom, dad, brothers, sisters, grandparents, aunts, godparents, this marvelous experience of the church as an ecclesiastical village is taken from them, because now they're students in a university and they have to walk in alone, and no one's prepared them for that. And the takeaway for me as the chaplain is nobody did anything wrong raising these children, but they left undone the one thing that they needed to do, which was to help this young person personalize and accept the faith as their own, so that in university they have the courage to walk into a building where everyone's Orthodox and everyone is a stranger. This is what I work with the college students. If you're not coming to my parish, then 2 of you are going to go to that parish, and 1 of you is going to go to the other parish, and 3 are going to come to my parish, and you're not going to create friendships because you're not spending time together. And you're going to, by the time you're seniors, you're going to have drifted away from the church. We have to cultivate those friendships.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed these 2 clips from previous interviews. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and find some friends, deep friends, godly friends who love our Lord, who are on the same, journey of the faith, who worship with you. And I think it's going to pay off some big benefits for your life. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye-bye.